unfold.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a story that honestly sounds like something out of a movie. I mean, an actual, spontaneous outbreak of peace right smack in the middle of one of the deadliest battlefields in World War I. Just listen to that. A soldier, Oswald Tilley, saying he was shaking hands with the very men he'd been trying to kill just hours before. Astounding is the right word. So how on earth does something like that happen? How do you go from mortal enemies to that? Well, the answer isn't simple. It's actually found in the absolutely miserable, unique conditions on the Western Front in late 1914. Right, so to really get the truths, you have to understand the hellscape these soldiers were living in. And I'm not exaggerating. By December 1914, it wasn't just a battlefield. It was something way, way worse. And the change happened so fast. That's what's crazy. You know that famous line, "The war will be over by Christmas"? Well, in just a few short months, that optimism completely evaporated. The initial war, this war of fast movement, just slammed on the brakes. And what was left was this grim, static reality of a war of attrition. Just stuck. And when I say stuck, I mean stuck. Just look at that number, 475 miles. That's a continuous line of trenches, a massive scar gouged across Europe, stretching all the way from the Swiss border to the North Sea. Millions of men just locked into this deadly, immovable stalemate. This wasn't a moving front anymore. It was a siege. And the conditions inside those trenches, they were just horrific. We're not talking about the reinforced concrete bunkers you might imagine from later in the war. No, these were just primitive ditches, basically scratches in the ground, filled with this thick, waist-deep mud from constant rain. I mean, disease like trench foot and dysentery was everywhere. But here's the kicker. The point that changes everything. The opposing lines were sometimes as close as 30 yards. You could literally hear the other guy cough. And this led to this weird, unspoken system of live and let live. It was this strange kind of familiarity that was already making the top brass really nervous. And then, on December 24th, a huge catalyst arrived. A sudden, hard frost just swept across Flanders. And look, this wasn't just a change in the weather. This was a total transformation of the battlefield. It turned that liquid mud into solid ground and made the damp air crisp and totally silent. So that sudden frost, it completely changed the atmosphere of the war. It silenced all that constant sniper fire and, get this, it created the perfect acoustic conditions for a different kind of offensive, a cultural one, not a military one. The first move actually came from the German side. Their high command had gone through this massive logistical effort to send thousands of tiny Christmas trees, Tannenbäume, to their troops on the front lines. And this is where things get really wild. Think about it. In a war fought in darkness and concealment, where a single matchlight could get you killed by a sniper, the Germans deliberately lit up their own lines with candles on these trees. I mean, can you imagine? They were basically sending the clearest signal possible. Tonight, we're choosing celebration over combat. First came the lights, then came the sound. The German soldiers started singing Stille Nacht, Silent Night. The British listened, and then they applauded. And then they responded with their own carols. It was like this musical duel. But the real breakthrough, the moment that bridged the gap, came with a hymn both sides knew in its original Latin, Adeste Fideles. You know it as, O come, all ye faithful. For just a moment, this shared, sacred language completely transcended their national hatred. It was like a bridge of words built right across no man's land. Okay, so that set the stage for Christmas morning. Fired up by the music and the incredible silence, the ordinary soldiers, the rank-and-file guys, they started to tentatively climb out of their trenches and into that frozen space between the lines. Now, what's really fascinating here is the psychology of it all. The British troops made this very clear distinction between the different types of German soldiers they met. They saw the Saxons as pretty friendly, relatable guys. But the Prussians? They were stereotyped as the aggressive militarists, the real enemy. And this little mental trick allowed them to rationalize the truce. It's like they were telling themselves, hey, we're not making peace with the enemy, we're just being friendly with these good Germans. It's amazing to think about, but for a short time, no man's land turned into an impromptu marketplace. Soldiers were bartering for everything from rations to souvenirs. That little brass Princess Mary gift tin filled with tobacco that the British troops got, That became like a high-value currency, eagerly traded for German cigars or those Gottmit-ons belt buckles. But, beyond all the almost festive gift-giving and bartering, the truce serves a much grimmer and very practical purpose. For weeks, the bodies of the dead had been just left out in no man's land, frozen. Now, for the first time, there was a chance to bring them in. And this might be the most profound part of the entire truce. British and German soldiers actually worked together, side by side, digging graves in that iron-hard ground. They held joint funeral services, sharing prayers over their fallen comrades. This act of shared mourning, of just acknowledging their common humanity in the face of death, probably cemented the truce more powerfully than any gift or song could have. But, of course, when you think of the Christmas truce, one image probably pops into your head. The football match. It's become this iconic legend, but did it really happen? Let's separate the fact from the myth. So, did they really play football? The short answer is yes. Absolutely, 100% yes. Now, the popular idea of a perfectly organized 90-minute match with referees and everything, that's mostly a myth that grew later. But football was, without a doubt, a huge part of the day. Can you just picture this? Most of the accounts describe these chaotic kickabouts, with hundreds of guys playing all at once on the frozen, shell-pocked ground. There were no referees, no official scores, and the ball? Well, they used whatever they could find, often a tin of bully beef, or maybe just a cap stuffed with rags. But amidst all that chaos, we have solid evidence for at least one game that was a bit more organized. And this is where the story gets its strongest proof. The most credible account we have comes from a German officer, Lieutenant Johannes Niemann. His regiment, the 133rd Saxons, played against some Scottish troops, and he even recorded the exact final score, a 3-2 victory for Fritz, as they called themselves. It's that kind of specific detail that takes this story from legend to historical fact. So the truce was this incredible, unbelievable moment, but it was a one-off. It never happened again. Why? Because the high command on both sides was absolutely furious. They didn't see a Christmas miracle. They saw an act of treason that threatened the entire will to fight. And, in fact, the commanders had seen this coming. This order you see here, it was issued weeks before Christmas. General Smith-Dorrien knew that if his soldiers started seeing the enemy as actual human beings, that offensive spirit needed to order them over the top to their deaths, well, it would just collapse. This was an act of institutional fear. And so the military machine systematically made sure a truce could never, ever happen again. For Christmas 1915, they issued explicit orders. Any fraternization would lead to an immediate court-martial. They ordered preemptive artillery barrages on Christmas Eve, just to make sure no one felt like singing. And most importantly, the very nature of the war had gotten uglier. The introduction of things like poison gas just destroyed any last shred of a so-called gentlemanly war. So what does this all mean in the end? I mean, think about that question. What does it mean if a moment of peace is more dangerous to an army than a battle? The Christmas truce, it wasn't some organized protest, but the way it was crushed reveals a fundamental truth about war. It proves that the dehumanization you need to make one person kill another is a fragile, man-made thing. And it can be completely shattered by something as simple as a shared song, a handshake, or a kickabout with a ball made of rags in the frozen mud.